It all began with a whisper, a soft, almost gentle sigh from the ice that carried a warning we were just too naive to heed. The sky, which had been a brilliant crystalline blue only moments before, started to curdle, turning a bruised, ominous gray right at the edges. One moment, I was standing outside our small research outpost, feeling the familiar, biting kiss of the Antarctic air on my cheeks, a sensation both harsh and, honestly, kind of exhilarating. The next, the world just vanished. The wind, no longer a whisper, became this furious, deafening roar, a physical force that slammed into me with the weight of a freight train. It stole the breath from my lungs and replaced it with 1,000 tiny daggers of ice. This wasn't just a storm, it was the continent itself rising in a rage, a white fury unleashed upon us. My first instinct was to stay put, to hunker down and wait for the storm to pass. But I knew that was a fool's hope. In this cold, standing still was a slow surrender to hypothermia. I had to move. I had to fight. Taking a single step was an act of sheer will, a monumental effort against the crushing force of the wind. Each footstep was a gamble. Was I walking towards the base or deeper into the endless, featureless expanse of the ice sheet? My compass was useless, spinning wildly, its magnetic needle confused by the polar energies. The mental challenge was just as great as the physical one. The isolation was absolute. The roaring wind created a wall of sound that was paradoxically silent, erasing any other noise and leaving me alone with the frantic beating of my own heart. My mind started to play tricks on me. I thought I saw the faint lights of the base, a ghostly glimmer in the swirling white, only for it to dissolve into nothingness. Hope became a dangerous trap, and I had to force myself to rely only on what was real. Time lost all meaning. Had it been minutes or hours? The world remained a chaotic blur of white. The initial surge of adrenaline had faded, replaced by a profound, bone-deep exhaustion. It was at this point that a new, more insidious fear began to creep in. I was truly lost. The direction I had chosen, a desperate guess in the heart of the storm, felt wrong. Every instinct screamed that I was walking away from safety, away from life, deeper into the frozen heart of Antarctica. I stumbled, my foot catching on an unseen ridge of ice, and fell hard onto the frozen ground. The impact jarred my entire body and knocked the wind out of me. For a moment, I just lay there, the snow beginning to pile up around me, a soft, seductive blanket. It would be so easy to close my eyes, to just rest for a minute. The temptation was immense, a siren's call to sleep, to surrender. It was the most dangerous moment of all. It was a small, sharp pain that saved me. The tip of my ice axe had dug into my side when I fell. That little jolt of pain was a spark in the darkness, a reminder that I was still alive, that I could still feel. I shouted into the wind, a raw, defiant cry that was immediately swallowed by the storm. But it was for me, not for the wind. It was a declaration that I was still fighting. As I stood there, gasping for breath, I saw it. A dark shape, faint and ephemeral, looming in the white chaos. Reaching the rock felt like cresting Everest. I collapsed against its frozen surface. The rough, solid texture a welcome contrast to the swirling chaos of the storm. It offered a small reprieve from the direct assault of the wind, a tiny pocket of relative calm in the heart of the tempest. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I could catch my breath without the wind trying to rip it from my lungs. My fingers were dangerously numb, and I knew I had to act fast. The slow, spreading warmth as I clutched it in my hands was one of the most exquisite sensations I have ever felt. It was a tiny spark of artificial life, a small defiance against the overwhelming cold. The world seen from my small shelter was a masterpiece of terrifying beauty. The wind sculpted the snow into mesmerizing, ever-changing patterns, creating waves and dunes that flowed like a liquid sea. The air was filled with a million tiny ice crystals that caught what little light there was, creating a strange, ethereal glow. It was a world of monochrome majesty, a place of incredible power and sublime artistry. It was then that I saw it, not a hallucination this time. A light, a steady pulsing beam cutting through the blizzard. It was the searchlight from one of the base's tracked vehicles. They were looking for me. Hope, real and overwhelming, surged through me, so powerful it almost brought me to my knees. I used the last of my strength to find my whistle and blew on it with everything I had. The shrill sound, a tiny pinprick against the storm's roar. But it was enough. The journey back to the base was a blur of warmth and relief. Bundled into the heated cabin of the vehicle, wrapped in thick blankets, I watched the storm rage outside the reinforced window. The contrast was staggering. The faces of my colleagues, etched with worry and relief, were the most beautiful sight I had ever seen. No words were needed. Their eyes said everything. In that small, rumbling vehicle, surrounded by friends, the vast, lonely wilderness of Antarctica felt a million miles away. The lessons learned in those few minutes of hell will stay with me forever. I learned that survival is not just about physical strength, but about mental fortitude. It's about fighting off despair when it feels most seductive. It's about focusing on the smallest of victories, the warmth of a heat pack, the shelter of a rock, and using them to build a fortress of hope. Antarctica stripped me down to my very essence and showed me a resilience I never knew I possessed. Now, as I stand here and look out at the ice, I see it differently. The storm has passed, leaving behind a world of breathtaking purity and silence. The sky is once again a brilliant, cloudless blue, and the sun glitters on the endless expanse of snow, turning it into a carpet of diamonds. The continent is no longer an adversary but a teacher, a harsh and unforgiving teacher certainly, but one that imparts profound wisdom. It teaches respect, humility, and an appreciation for the simple fact of being alive, for the warmth of the sun, for the company of others. Those 5 minutes in the White Fury were the longest and most terrifying of my life, but they were also, in a strange way, the most profound. Surviving that blizzard was not just about staying alive, it was about rediscovering what it truly means to live. It was a stark reminder that even after the darkest storm, there is always the promise of a new dawn.